Mark, thank you so much for that warm welcome. And it is fantastic to be with PopCon today, albeit virtually. This is not Big Brother is watching you. This is Suella Braverman beaming in from DC. And I've got to say, it's a pretty hot DC. There is a heat wave currently engulfing Washington, DC right now. And I have to say, I'm pretty happy to have gotten out of the UK and our brilliant summer weather of torrential rain. Is that it for summer now, do you reckon? Is that summer? I think summer is pretty much over. Very, very pleased to join you and to have emerged from the battle royale of last week's general election. I want to put on record my huge thanks to everyone at PopCon, everyone in the room, for your steadfast support for our great party. Listen, these are dark days for us. We've just had a devastating result. We've lost a lot of good MPs, a lot of good Conservatives, and I know how hard many of you will have worked over the last 6 weeks of this campaign. It was challenging, it was grueling, it was brutal, and we have to now face the facts as to why we ended up in this situation and, importantly, what we do about it to move forward. And I know PopCon is going to play a pivotal role in the renaissance of our Conservative Party, because boy, does the country need it. Labour has installed itself and will start its job of dismantling the structures that have enabled prosperity, that are the foundation of our law and order and the things that we cherish in this country to make our country great. And we need to be an effective opposition. We need to expose the dangers and the damage that they will be doing. And we need to do it effectively and in a way to bring back our voters. So what went wrong? Listen, there'll be lots of discussion right now. Now's the right time for analysis, post-mortem and inquiry. But, we lost half of our votes from the 2019 election. Our vote went down from about 13 million to just under 7 million. We lost 2/3 of our members of parliament, and we lost across all kinds of demographics. The realignment of 2019 was shattered. And of course, we're all learning our lessons right now, and learning is good, right? Learning is hard, I think, and I'm not sure everyone is necessarily ready to learn some politically and personally painful lessons, but we must learn these lessons. Now, we had a truly great majority in 2019. We were promising to do what the British people wanted. What did we do? We were going to use our Brexit freedoms. I campaigned for Brexit. I voted against Theresa May's deal to ensure we had a proper Brexit. But we were going to use our Brexit freedoms to stop the waves of illegal migrants landing on our shores. We were going to cut taxes. We were going to lower overall legal migration. We were going to stop the lunatic woke virus working its way through the British state. The harsh reality, this is the lesson we all need to learn and face up to, is that we did none of that. And then we tried sometimes, when campaigning, to pretend that we had done it. Because, what we mostly did after 2022, when Rishi Sunak was Prime Minister, was to roll out a programme that our new Labour government today could quite happily adopt, and probably will, on migration, on taxation, on the size of the state, on issues to do with politically correct nonsense in the public sector and indeed the corporate private sector. There were farcical gimmicks like proposed smoking bans applied to people depending on what year you were born. There was more and more regulation that we were passing on businesses, on housing and development. There was nonsense like letting criminals out early and scrapping shorter sentences for lower level crime. undermining confidence in our criminal justice system, letting down victims, and demoralising the police. Something I, together with colleagues, fought back against from the backbenches. Were there to be new homes to solve the housing crisis and to empower young people and to ensure that we could empower people to start a family, to settle down, to move forward with their lives? No. We talked big, we produced policy paper after policy paper, but when it came down to it, we did nothing of significance on house building. And what we also particularly didn't do was mention the war. We didn't mention immigration. We didn't want to talk about immigration, we didn't want to see immigration. But immigration spiraled out of control. And we failed and refused to tackle head-on the discussion about the role of out-of-control population growth in one very small place and the pressure that has put on pushing asset inflation sky high, on putting pressure on our public resources and our services, and on our cultural and national identity. Didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to look at it. And as a result, people felt very angry and very betrayed with our track record. So, to my mind, that's a diagnosis of what went wrong. And in a nutshell, that can be summed up as we did not do what we promised to do. People saw it. There was no getting away from the fact that we failed on our promises, and people voted accordingly at the ballot box. And, the level of catastrophe really was aggravated by the fact that reform emerged on the political landscape as a phenomenon. Now, to my mind, the reform phenomenon was entirely predictable and avoidable and all our own fault. It's no good denigrating reform voters. It's no good smearing the Reform Party. It's no good comparing reform rallies to the rallies of Nuremberg. That's not going to work. Criticising people for voting reform is a fundamental error to make. Historically, in British politics, we have had the monopoly on the right-wing vote. That's one of the reasons why we've been so successful politically. The left, by contrast, for the last 100 years, has been split. Left-wing voters have had a choice of party to go for. And we, by contrast, have had the luxury of a monopoly, but no longer. And that is why the Reform Party presents an existential threat to us electorally. To my mind, if there's any chance of our renewal or success, we have to accept the simple, basic truth that the Reform Party has taken many of our traditional lifelong voters. They are now their voters, and we need to do everything we can to win them back. There is space in British politics for only one Conservative Party, and at the moment, our place in that spectrum is under serious threat. So, what do we have to do to revive our fortunes? Well, I think there are three basic themes that we need to keep in mind. First of all, we need to restore trust, not just with the electorate, but actually within our own party. The integrity of the Conservative Party has broken down. For too long, grassroots members have been sidelined, disenfranchised, and treated pretty badly, to be honest. It was members who chose an election-winning Prime Minister in the form of Boris Johnson that led us to our success in 2019. And yet it was MPs who ousted him and replaced him with their choice of candidate. Rishi Sunak, installed by MPs, led us to our greatest defeat. This was really a way of robbing members of their right, of their voice, of their say. It cannot be allowed to happen again. In this election campaign, we saw associations, hard-working members on the ground, who knew their communities best, be totally ignored and disrespected and have inappropriate and frankly unsuitable candidates parachuted in because they were friends of those within the leadership, because they had worked at Number 10, because they were allies of those in power. A total undermining of democracy in our party. And we've seen many of those candidates go on to lose what were previously safe seats. Again, another example of how members must be re-enfranchised and re-empowered going forward in our party. That's how we restore trust. Secondly, we need to restore credibility on the core Conservative policies that unite all of us when it comes to being members of this great party. We need credibility on immigration. No longer have we been trusted to control and lower immigration because we've been weak, we've been squeamish, and we've failed to tackle this very pressing concern amongst the British people. Time after time, election after election, the British people have voted to cut migration, and the Conservative Party has disregarded those votes. So we need to actually show that we are serious and challenge the Labour agenda, which will be one of raising immigration. So on legal migration, we've got to point out, we've got to challenge, we've got to keep making the case for lower and more controlled immigration. And on illegal migration, I don't foresee this problem being solved anytime soon under this Labour government. They will make the UK a magnet for illegal migrants. They will only undermine our borders even further. And ultimately, they will grant an amnesty to those people who are here illegally and don't have a right to be in the UK. So we need to demonstrate that credibility on this issue by proposing and adopting as a party policy a view of leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. We've tiptoed around the subject for years. We've ummed and ahed, we've flirted with it, and we've made all of the right noises. But ultimately, we've never been unequivocal about this pressing cause of the problem. We cannot control our borders. In fact, we don't have real sovereignty as long as we are judged and adjudicated by a foreign court in Strasbourg. So whoever is leading the party and whatever the composition of our party is, we must have now a policy of leaving the European Convention of Human Rights, scrapping the Human Rights Act, and ensuring that we have a human rights regime which is fit for purpose, reflective of British rights and responsibilities, and which will actually enable us to control our borders once and for all. We've got to lead that campaign. We've got to lead that discussion. And then lastly, we need to restore hope. And I think this was something that was quite dispiriting throughout the campaign. The more that the Conservative Party seemed to mimic the Labour Party, it's also very difficult for voters to distinguish between the Conservatives and Labour on these issues like immigration, taxation, politically correct policies within the public sector. We were mimicking Labour. It was hard to distinguish the two parties. But fundamentally, we failed to give people inspiration, passion for our party, and hope. And so I believe we need to be the party that says that we are unapologetically patriotic, that we are the party that stands for duty, for service, the party that stands for the bonds of loyalty that have tied our society together and made us into a cohesive, organic unit. We are the party that stands for, ultimately, the true conservatism. And what I mean by that is a conservatism which says to people, we are the party of aspiration, but ultimately, that we are also the champions of family, the party of duty, of love of our country, service to our people, respect for all, community, traditional culture specific to our nation, the party of home. We must fight to protect our national culture, which is precious because it unifies each and every one of us and it allows us to feel at home in our country. That culture, what do I mean by that culture? It's a culture that's contained in our customs, in our religion, in our traditions, in our common law, in our architecture, in our music, in our arts, in our educational institutions, in our sporting traditions, and in our constitution. These timeless virtues that have made our country great over the centuries, but of which we are not ashamed. Being British, being patriotic, loving our country, admiring and revering the spirit of the great British people is something that we should unashamedly occupy. And for too long, we've been nervous, we've been reticent, we've been shy about demonstrating that love of our country. And aspiration, we need to be the party that makes it clear we're on the side of the grafters, of the strivers, of the people who take a risk to make their lives and the lives of their families and their communities better. We want to be the party that says, it doesn't matter where you come from, it's where you're going. And for me, those messages of aspiration and culture was severely missing in this campaign. And it's something that I very much dearly want my party to espouse and proclaim going forward. So those are my thoughts. Onwards, comrades. We can win, we can overcome. We've just got to learn these lessons. We've got to be honest. We've got to be patient with each other. But I do believe the opportunity is there and that we can prevail in the end. Thank you.